to make a race mind slaves, our ancestors, to replace the miners from the planet Nibiru who came to Earth to mine gold, to send back to Nibiru, to refine it to powder and then float it into Nibiru's sky as a shield against radiation, heat, and cold. So Dr. Lessin will now give you some background for People of Earth Part 5, and you'll see why we call the first part of this episode Parental Prolificacy.
On Earth, when they got there, Enlil, who was the commander of this expedition of gold miners to Nibiru, was obsessed with doing better than his older brother Enki, who was also on the planet in the capacity of chief scientist for the Nibiru gold mining expedition to Earth. Now, both Enlil and Enki courted Ninmah when she got to Earth. She came there with 50 female nurses, and they were supposed to service the whole expedition. Now, both Enki and Enlil really wanted to have babies, especially boys, with Ninmah. Ninmah was her half-sister, and she was the only sister they had, a half-sister on Earth, which is what they really desired. And they knew they were going to each beget lineages on Earth. And so they wanted to be senior with the older boys who would have a lot more power than their rivals. And so only boys could, with Ninmah, were going to give Enki or Enlil a chance to build their royal lines. Okay, so Janet is now going to speak in her Ninmah avatar, and she'll relate the story as follows.
Speaking as my Ninmah persona, I want you to know that back on Nibiru, I had been engaged to marry Enki, my father's firstborn son, and my half-brother. The children Enki and I would begat were to be the legal successors to the throne of Nibiru after Anu, who was the correct next in line to be king when King Lama died or retired. Then Anu, my dad, would become king, and Enki would be next in line, like Prince William is when King Charles's reign is over. So Enki and I were in the line of succession. As Earth's spouse, I would rule through my sons, the closest thing I could get to ruling Nibiru since I'm female. So I had it made. But alas, Anu sold me out in a dynamic compromise with Alalu, who was the king, who was King Lama's assassin. And Alalu became king after Lamha and made Father Anu his cupbearer. So it's kind of like Game of Thrones. And Anu accepted this to avoid civil war. He had to break my engagement to Enki, and he had Enki marry Alalu's daughter Damkina, with the understanding that the first boy that Enki and Damkina begat, not Anu or Enki, would succeed Alalu as the king of Nibiru. So Anu canceled my engagement to Enki and made Enki marry Alalu's daughter Damkina, and it did begat a son named Marduk, who was slated to be the king after Alalu, though Anu later prevented that. Anyway, my dreams of marrying Enki and being his queen when Enki became king were shattered when Anu eventually did become king and left Enki out of the line of succession. Father Anu agreed to step out of the line in favor of Alalu to avoid civil war between his followers and those of Alalu. And I had needs too. Enki, who now married Damkina, was unavailable to me. And so I started hanging out with his younger brother, Enlil, who's very dashing and seductive. So Enlil later became father's legal heir because now he is the firstborn son of Antu, who is father's half-sister and spouse. So Enlil and I got together and we begat my dear son Ninurta, but it was without dad's permission. And so father was enraged. Although Anu eventually overthrew and executed the Lalu and made Enlil his legal successor, Anu was enraged that I connected with Enlil without his permission and ignored his right as my father to decide with whom I bred. Dad was so mad that he forbade me to ever have a legal dynastic marriage. I was forbidden to ever wed and breed legal heirs in the Nibiru succession line. Needless to say, I thought all was lost. But then came an interesting turn of events. My mistake turned into a blessing in disguise. When I got to Earth, to induce me to mate again with him, Enlil, who was over there, now commanded the entire Nibiru gold mining expedition to Earth, and he told me of his plans for stations in Iraq. And he said he'd bring our son to Nurta and build a center for my staff of female doctors. So he was trying to get me over to his side. He flew me to his place in Lebanon. And perfect, he said, for your seeds from Nibiru. We'll make euphoric elixir from the fruit that you bring, with your seeds that you brought with you. So Adnan was obsessed with besting Enki, and he courted me again. And he was very nice and very sweet. And Enlil and his rival Enki, they both wanted babies with me, and I'm their half sister and the only half sister on Earth. The Nibiru law held that only boys would build the royal lines in succession on Earth, and I guess in the whole system. So at his place in Lebanon, Enlil held me and he kissed me with fervor. And he said, "Oh, my sister, my beloved," he whispered, trying to seduce me. But, Enlil couldn't satisfy me because in my mind, I had already decided to renew my old romance with my Enki. I've always loved Enki. He was my first love. So now he's my ex-fiance, and now he's on Earth as well. And he was the expedition chief scientist, and he was boss of the gold mining operations here on Earth. I was so excited about the possibilities of connecting with Enki that I wasn't present enough for Enlil to arouse him sufficiently to satisfy me sexually. I take responsibility for that. So that didn't work, and I moved on to Enki. When I got together with Enki, he told me, he was very sweet, "Come with me, your adoration of Enlil abandoned." And I said, "Let's go." So we went to his palace in Bahrain, and Enki spoke to me words of love and very sweet words. And he said, "You are still my beloved." He caressed and kissed me, and his phallus began to water and rise, and we made love. And Enki into my womb, he poured his semen, and he said, "Give me a son." He cried. If he could beget a son with me, the boy would be considered a rival to Enlil and the sons of Enlil on Earth. And Enki kept imploring me, "Make a boy with me." But he and I begat two girls. First was Gestiana, and then Ninsen. And Enki was, well, he loved them, but he wasn't very excited. He wanted boys. So that winter, I stayed in paradise that Enki was created for me in Bahrain, which is Dilmun. And when spring sprung, I told him that Ninsen, I mused, she was nearly full grown and she looked and acted a lot like me. I told Enki, "Spring's coming and I must return to Sherbek, which is the Anunnaki medical research facility in Iraq. So without my supervision, my assistants won't get anything done. So I had to get back there. Nothing will happen on the projects until I returned. I wanted to get them going. So I said to Enki, "I'll be back with you and our daughters, Shestiana and Inson, when winter hits Eden in Iraq. But before I go, remember the girls will grow in record time. Gestiana takes care of herself and Inson is almost fully grown. So I leave both my girls with you, satisfied that they are safe in this pure and healthy place where they are far away from illness, hatred, or harm. I thought Enki would miss me, but I would be busy, but he would be busy controlling waterways that he had excavated. But when I left Enki in Bahrain with our daughters and returned to my job in Iraq, Enki incested our second daughter, Ninsun, who bore our granddaughter, Ninkura, who was also Enki's daughter. And then when Enki saw Ninsun walking alone in the marshes, his eyes fell on her and he felt a longing. Since I had left for the med center in Iraq, no maiden had touched his heart in quite the same way as Ninsun. So as he watched her walking alone through the marshlands, he was amazed how much she resembled me. He realized how lucky that he was that she looked like me. And so Enki rushed to her side and began wooing her to make wild, passionate love with him right there by the riverside. And Ninsun, who was young and virginal and curious, was eager to experience the overwhelming power of love in her body, heart, mind, and soul. And Enki, he's always been handsome, powerful, and charming. He overwhelmed her, and in no time, Ninsun yielded, and they made passionate, wild love. So Enki remained with Ninsun for a while, and he knew that she could be pregnant with his seed, and she was. So he stayed with her until the 9th month on Earth, and she birthed a child named Ninkura, who would become to be known as the goddess of mountain pastures. And I resumed relating sexually with Enki, and again he said, "Give me a son," as he cried out as he ejaculated into me. I didn't realize how desperate he was for a son. But of course, if he could beget a son with me, the boy would be considered a rival to Enlil and the sons of Enlil. So we begat a third girl, and her name was Ninkura. So when I went back to work in Iraq, Enki seduced Ninkura, then he tired of her and left her, just as he'd done Ninsun, our second girl. Okay, Ninkura raised Utu, the little girl she had born from Enki's affair with her. Utu grew rapidly, as did all the Nibiru royals that were born on Earth, and she became a beautiful teenager. Meanwhile, while I was back in Sherbuk, when I returned to Dilmun, I saw the sadness in the eyes of my daughter Ninsun and my granddaughter Ninkura. Enki felt guilty that he had seduced and abandoned Ninkura and knew I would resent the brief affair he had with Ninkura in a pregnancy that begat Utu. So Enki kept his distance from me and from Ninsun, from Ninkura, and from Utu, and who was his daughter he had begotten with Ninkura. So he stayed away from retreat and moved about Bahrain, perfecting the riverbeds, irrigation canals, and reservoirs of Dilmun. I warned you to avoid the riverbanks and marshes, or if you go to them, bring a chaperone. Avoid all the places where your father, Enki, hangs out. If he sees you, he will want to have sex with you. If you have sex with him, you will swell with a child, and when it's born, he'll leave you, just as he left your mom and your grandmother, Ninsun too. So for a while, Utu heeded my advice and kept out of Enki's lusty sight. But he was lonely and curious about this newest daughter, and he sought out Utu. He brought her apples, cucumbers, and grapes, and plied her with his warm, seductive charm, and she eventually let him lie in her lap. And that was the end of it. They stroked and kissed, and she joyfully surrendered her virginity to him. And while she remembered my warning, despite that, she still spent another night making love with Enki. But in the morning, her head cleared, and when she looked into Enki's eyes, she knew, as Enki gave her a tender kiss and rose and took his leave, and didn't say when he would return to her, that he would not continue to be her lover. So she almost wept, but instead decided to herself, I vow not to be bonded to Enki. And from this moment on, if he doesn't want me for myself and what we can create together, I shall not carry his seed in my being. So Utu came to me, and I led her through a termination ritual, basically an abortion. But it was also a ritual that freed her emotionally to love again. It took her to a clear space in her garden for this ritual to stop Enki's seed from creating a child in her that she did not want. I told her, wipe out Enki's seed from your body and bury it in the depths of the earth. With his seed, bury the promise of life you were to share with Enki. Let the earth receive the seed that you and Enki created and transform it. I had Utu dig several rows of small holes in the soil with a trowel, and I had her take Enki's ejaculate in a small wooden jewelry box and bless it. She pressed a tiny bit of the ejaculate in each hole she had dug as she and I wept. Then Utu buried the imagined future she believed she would have had with Enki and released the future she had imagined with him. I said, take time to heal body, mind, heart, and soul, dear Utu. Gain wisdom from this experience. Ask for as much as you can give from future lovers. Reciprocation is the balance for everlasting relationships. Utu and I visited the clearing where we had buried Enki's seed for 9 consecutive days. On the 9th day, 8 plants, luscious and strong, began to sprout as if they had grown from Enki's seed and shared their care at the same time, bonding with each other as we released our pain at Enki's cavalier behavior. So I left Enki in Bahrain, and I went once again to work at the medical center in Sherbrooke in Iraq. While I was gone, Enki and his vizier Ismud, who was the two-faced god, came upon my private garden where Utu and I had raised plants on the tissue of the fetus that Utu had aborted after Enki incested her. In the garden, Enki and Ismud saw 8 strange, well-cared-for planets, and Enki said, I want to taste them.
Plants, not planets.
Plants. Okay, I said plants. Enki said, I want to taste them. Ismud cut a piece from the plant and gave it to Enki, who ate it. And Enki said, this is good. And he beamed and he was smiling. And this fueled his curiosity to know the nature of the 7 remaining plants. So Ismud cut samples of each plant and passed each of them to Enki, who ate each sample. When I returned to Duman, I saw that chunks had been cut from each of my plants, and I found that Enki had eaten the chunks. I told him, I'm furious at your disdain for my plants. My face, as long as I live, shall you never see again. I walked away uncomfortable that I had lost control and spewed these words, but I said them. Soon after, Enki fell ill, and I had been gone, and so they came and got me, and I immediately rushed back to him and said, I'm here. I said, the nest of creation of seeds you ate made you ill, but I'll take them into my body to neutralize and transmute them so that they will bring healing and not harm to you. So I sent warmth all over him, and I stayed with him all night and day, and for each of the body parts that hurt him, I made love with him until a child was conceived and born. When finally his pains ended, he felt stronger than ever and told me, you healed me with your love, sending your soul deep into my body. How could I have been so stupid not to understand that when I made love with all of our girls, it was you I longed for? We smiled, we kissed and hugged, and with great passion sealed our fate together forever, and for as long as we want to be together.
Well, Enki was now ready to deal with his wife, and so he asked the king, who is now Anu, who gotten rid of Olalu. Send my wife Damkina with me. I got to breed a lineage. And so not only did he send Damkina, but he also got Marduk, who had been the pretender, supposed to follow Olalu, and who Anu had cut out. He sent Marduk, Enki's son, to him with Damkina. And so now Enki made a really nice house in Basra for Damkina. And he spent a lot of time with Marduk, teaching him all kinds of wisdom and what they had to do in order to become powers on earth. Next slide, please. He trained Marduk in advanced science, in diplomacy, mathematics, and engineering. And Marduk had already observed a heck of a lot while he was on Nibiru. He'd been planning on being king all along. And so he realized, I'm entitled to rule, and I will not allow myself to live forever in a minor position in this outpost. I'm going to take over someday. So one of the assignments Enki got, as his when he was working for Enlil, was to take Enlil's granddaughter, Erishkigal, to the weather observation station at Pont Arguelles at the bottom of South Africa. Now, she's a member of Enlil's clan, but she's got this job, and the job puts her right in the territory of Enlil's one of his second son, Nergal. And Nergal did not want a woman from the rival clan in the same territory. And so he decided he was going to kill her. And he got ready to kill her. And when he saw this beautiful woman, now she was pregnant from Enki, but she was still quite fetching. He decided that he'd marry her instead. Matter of fact, he said, "I'm going to kill you if you don't marry me." And so she said, "Oh, I'll marry you." And as soon as the kid that she was pregnant by, his name was Ningishita, later known as Thoth, was born and old enough to travel, Nergal had Ningishita sent to Enki's place in Great Zimbabwe, and Enki then raised Ningishita and found out he was an incredible genius, and he was in a unique position because his mother was a member of Enlil's clan. That's what we call a matrilineate, who had some loyalty to his uncle Enlil, but he was Enki's son, so he had ultimate loyalty to his father in the patrilineage, Enki. But that made him a natural bridge between the two lineages, and that's going to be important in the whole rest of the history that we go through. Okay, next. Well, that's just a picture I had of Nergal and Erishkigal. They seem to have hit it off. Next. And a little bit about the place. There's a hole in the wall. We'll come in the next set that we do in part 6. We'll go into how that hole got in the wall. But it was a really grand place. It's right on the line of the 30th parallel and not parallel, meridian, the meridian that's going to have a very important place in what the Anunnaki do. And it's ellipse-shaped, and it's made with, it has a mortarless wall. They knew how to make mortar with chemically bonded cement, like we're just now learning in our society. And it's 250 meters round, and it sits among these thousands and thousands of 12-foot foot wide walls lined with granite boulders through which electric charges were sent, and the Anunnaki, using solar technology, were able to transport water and gold ore all over South Africa from the veins of gold where they were mining them. And we'll go into that in the next sequence, which is 6. But here, let's look at, here's another picture, if you go to the next slide, of an ancient drawing of Enki and his son Ningishita, who grows up to be probably the smartest person ever on our planet. And here's a picture of the before the hole got blasted into the wall of Greater Zimbabwe. And as far as the lanes, here's a close-up. Let's look at the next slide of what those lanes look like. These extend all over the whole southeast of Africa. Now, the mining was done by volunteers from Nibiru who were saying, we're going to get the gold and save the planet. But they did not know that they were going to be kept there and kept there and kept there for decade after decade, eating dirt. And Enlil was a stingy overall boss. He gave them less and less rations. He didn't give them enough beer. And the Anunnaki are very fond of beer. And there wasn't any girls. And they were on the verge of mutiny anyway. And Enki had empathy with these guys. He said, we got to send them home. And what was happening in Greater Zimbabwe is Enki and Ninmah and Ningishita were secretly doing all kinds of genetic experiments. Enki had it in his mind to create some way to breed the Anunnaki with their superior, they thought, superior intelligence and way of organizing things, which is domination consciousness. That would incorporate some of the wisdom of the hominoid who had already been developed in Africa in the days of the Treaty of Hatona, when they had ended the Draco-Lyran Wars and decided they would put different kinds of humanoids all over the planet. And the humanoid that the Treaty of Hatona placed in Africa was Homo erectus, or the ancestors of Homo erectus. And Homo erectus developed into an incredibly wonderful tribal person. He could communicate telepathically. He felt great empathy. It was a truly magnificent human being. And Enki said, that's the one. If we could just combine our genes, we have a lot of power. We're really good at dominating everything. These people are they just care for each other and for other animals and for nature so much. If we could combine those two things, well, someday we may have to even leave Nibiru entirely. And when we do, if we can make the right kind of hybrid, you can inherit the planet. In the meantime, I can use these hybrids, if we get them in line in time, we can use them to save the miners from Nibiru and send them home. These poor guys, I'm going to have them hold back gold, and Enlil and Ninurta with their weapons will come down to see what's wrong. And just when it's about to get into a armed confrontation, I'm going to save the day with these with the hybrid that I intend with Ningishita and Ninmah to create. So just hold back on sending gold ore, do a slowdown. I know they haven't developed unions here yet, but this will be an incipient union. One day they may have something like that. We can't have this top-down stuff all the time. It just doesn't work. But anyway, don't worry, boys. Just do what I say. Withhold the gold a bit, and the boss will come down here, and I'll take it from there.
Okay, is that the end?
That's it for this one. You've got to tune into the next episode, which is episode 6.
So here's some of our books that we have on the Anunnaki. They're available at Amazon.com. This is our main website, enkispeaks.com. It's just a picture of us. We did Stargate to the Cosmos. And here's some of our books that we have in Harsag. I'm working on a series called The Dragon at the End of Time. There's a couple more books from that series. And here we go. I just published Ninmah, Mother of Humanity in 2023. Some more Dragon at the End of Time. And we have some Tantra books, Dance of the Soul. That's another moment, bunch of the Anunnaki books. Repeated that. Okay, that's it. Well, thank you so much for coming. Much love and aloha. And
Aloha from Maui.